Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my November wrap-up. This wrap-up is a little bit late because as I'm filming this it's already the 16th of December and before I've got this edited, well, it might be the same day, but I don't think so. But the first few weeks of December have been a little bit hectic for me, so I'm only getting around to filming this now, much to my annoyance, but here we are. November was quite a good reading month for me though. I read 6 books and I gave all of them at least 4 stars. So that's a very good reading month. So without further ado, let's get into it right away because I don't have that much time before it's getting dark outside. The first book I finished in November was one I'd already been listening to on audio in October as well, and it was Tunnel of Bones by V.E. Schwab. This is the second book in the Cassidy Blake trilogy, which is a middle grade trilogy about Cassidy, who had a near-death experience when she almost drowned in a river but was saved by a ghost who has now become her best friend. Because of her near-death experience, because of her coming in close contact with death, she is now able to see ghosts and to travel into the Vale where she can send ghosts on to their final resting place. So she has kind of become a ghost hunter even though her best friend is also a ghost. And on top of that, her parents are also very interested in the paranormal. They don't know that their daughter can actually see ghosts, but they have written books under the name The Inspectors, as Inspector and Inspector. And at the start of the first book they tell Cassidy that they are going to be filming a television show, and for that they will be traveling to different cities on the planet. So in the first book they travel to Edinburgh and Cassidy gets into an entire adventure surrounding ghosts there. And in this one, Tunnel of Bones, she travels to Paris. And there she encounters a poltergeist, which is a very powerful, special kind of spirit that she will have to defeat in some way. I ended up giving this book 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. I really loved the first book as well, City of Ghosts, and for the longest time I didn't really feel the same connection to Tunnel of Bones as I did to that first book, but I really thought that the villain, the poltergeist, was a very interesting aspect to the story. He wasn't just any kind of unfeeling ghost villain type thing. I thought it was very interesting, and I also read the third book in this series later that month, later in November. So apparently we're not doing things chronologically in this video, but later in the month I read the third book, which was Bridge of Souls. I finished that a few days before the end of the month. I listened to that on audio as well. And in that book, Cassidy and her parents and Jacob, her ghost best friend, travel to New Orleans. And they have another adventure there, and that is basically the end of the series, I think. I enjoyed it a lot. I gave it 4 stars, but it wasn't as good for me as the first 2 books. I didn't really like the adversary, the villain in the third book. I thought it was a bit less interesting than the first 2 books. It had a bit less of a story behind it. It was much less rooted in New Orleans, so the city they were going to than the first 2 books were rooted in those places. The villain in City of Ghosts was definitely an Edinburgh villain. It was really connected to the history of the city. And in Tunnel of Bones, the villain was really connected to the catacombs that are underneath Paris, where a lot of dead people are housed, are stored. Their bones have been put to rest. And I was really excited about the third book taking place in New Orleans, but it just didn't really feel the same to me. It felt a bit more disconnected from the place it was set. It was fun to see Lara again. Lara was a character we met in the first book. She was a bit of a know-it-all, a bit of an annoying character at first, but she did become a very close friend to Cassidy. And I really enjoyed that she got a bigger role in Bridge of Souls because she wasn't really all that much in Tunnel of Bones. And all in all, I really enjoyed this series. I think it is a great middle grade series if you're looking for one. It was so much fun to follow Cassidy and Jacob around the world, and I really liked Cassidy as a main character. She is very brave. She dives into things head first without really thinking about them, which can be annoying, but in her it really worked. So those were the 2 audiobooks I listened to. I did read a lot of V.E. Schwab this year and I very much enjoyed it. This series was so much fun and I'm really glad that I decided to read it this year. So then we move on to some more books. Where are they? Where did I put them? Over here. This is chaotic. I wasn't planning on filming this today and then all of a sudden I got into the spirit of it and decided to do it, even though it's getting dark and this video is very orange, but we're just going with it. Another book I finished, I have no idea where this is chronologically in the month of November, but I finished Troy by Stephen Fry, which is one of the books that was on my list of 10 books I want to read in 2021. Which, if you don't know, is a list of books I kind of force myself to read. They're all books that I have on my shelves, that I want to read, that have been on my shelves for a long time, or I want to read for a special reason that year. I've been doing it for 3 years now, I think. And I actually finished the 10th book in December, so you'll see that one in the December wrap-up, but this was the 9th one. It is Troy. It is the 3rd book in Stephen Fry's retelling of Greek mythology series. The first one was Mythos, the second one was Heroes, and this one clearly retells the story of the Trojan War. And I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I think I started it in October or maybe even September, so I took my time reading this, but I really didn't mind because it kind of reads like a history book and not just one big story. A fun history book though, definitely an interesting history book with lots of jokes and a great writing style. I really enjoy these books by Stephen Fry. I did feel like I learned a bit less from this one than I did from the first 2 books, because over the past year or 2 I have read both The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker and Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which are both set during the Trojan War as well. So I already learned quite a bit about this war and everything that went down in it. But those 2 were definitely novels, and this is more the history side of it. So you definitely get a different perspective on things. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I don't really have that much to say about it. If you're looking to find out more about Greek mythology, if that is a subject that you're interested in, you want to know more about, or you always like reading about, then I definitely recommend this series by Stephen Fry. Next year, the 4th book is coming out. The title escapes me right now, but I think it is about the Odyssey. Maybe it's just called Odyssey. I'm not sure. But I'm really excited to read it because I don't know much about the Odyssey yet. I was a bit less excited to read this one because I knew so much about it already, like I said. But the Odyssey I don't know much about, and I'm very excited to get to when it comes out. I kept forgetting about it throughout the year, but this year I also participated in the Buzzword Reading Challenge, which was created by Kayla from Books and Lala. And every month there is a certain buzzword that you have to read a book with. That wasn't very clear or grammatically correct, I think, but you have to find a book with that buzzword in the title. And in November the buzzword was lost, and I didn't have any books on my shelves with that word in it, except from Paradise Lost. But I definitely wasn't going to read that in November. I'm not sure if I'll ever read it, even though it is on my shelves. But I decided to pick up Spellbook of the Lost and Found by Maura Fowley Doyle. I read it on my Kindle and it was really, really good. It did take me some time to get into it, but once I did, I was fully engaged, fully wrapped up in the story. I was super intrigued. I was on the edge of my seat. At certain parts within the story, my heart was actually beating faster because it was so suspenseful, or it felt suspenseful to me because I was so invested in the characters. So let's just tell you what it's about. The story is set in a small town in Ireland where we follow 3 different girls, 3 different perspectives, and early in the story we find out that people around town are starting to lose things, ranging from a small hairpin to a bracelet that's very important to them, to even a child. It becomes clear quite early on that what's going on isn't really coincidence and there is something more at play here, and then we find out that one of the girls and her friends have found a spell book called the Spellbook of the Lost and Found, and within it there is a spell that will bring back lost things. And because they have lost something that's important to them, they decide to do the spell and hope that what they have lost will return to them. Of course, there's always another side to these kinds of spells. There's something that will happen, something they will have to give in return. And due to this spell and them performing it to gain what they have lost, people around town are starting to lose things instead. And that's basically the premise of the story. There are a couple of different characters. There are 2 runaways who have a very mysterious past and they are living in a abandoned estate. There is Olive, who is my favorite character. I think she is one of the girls we see the story through. She has a very fun family with lots of dogs that are named after different types of cereals, which I enjoyed. She has a very lovely friendship with her best friend Rose. There are quite a few more characters, and I did have some difficulty keeping apart some of the perspectives, even though there were only 3 of them. I was a little bit confused sometimes about from which character I was reading at that point, because the writing style isn't very different when it comes to the different characters. I think that was also one of the reasons why it took me some time to really get into the story, but when I did, I was completely invested. Things go very wrong, there are some very cool reveals. You really worry about these characters because you can see what they're doing is very dumb and very stupid, but not in an annoying way, I thought, and it is all very magical as well. You keep wondering what is coincidence, what is real, and what is magical, what is due to this spell. And at times it is also very creepy. It's very atmospheric throughout the entire story, which is something that I love in stories, and I really enjoyed it. This was the first book that I read by Moira Fowley Doyle. I did read one of their short stories, which was From Proud, which is a collection of short stories I read I think in 2019, and ever since I read that story I had wanted to read a full novel by this author because I did enjoy it so much, and I'm glad that I now did because this was a very good book. Then the next book that I read was a graphic novel, and it is Monstrous Volume 1 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I picked this up a few months ago in a bookstore in Amsterdam, as you might have seen if you've seen my recent book haul. I'll link it up above and down below. This is the first volume in a series that I think now has about 6, 7 or 8 volumes, I'm not entirely sure. And I've seen it around on BookTube a lot, especially on Olivia's channel from Olivia's Catastrophe. She really loves this graphic novel series and I thought it sounded very interesting, so when I encountered it I decided to pick it up. And I really loved it too. This first volume is very much about getting to know the world and getting to know the characters. I was confused for considerable parts of the story, and I've heard from other people that they were too. But I think that was very deliberately done. You get very intentional pieces of the story throughout this first volume, and by the end of it, I think the idea is that you've become so intrigued that you want to know more. That's what happened with me. I got very intrigued in the world, because this is a fantasy world that's very interesting and that I know a little bit about, but it feels like only a nugget of information and there's still so much more world building to be established in a good way. I did think the characters were fun. I did really like the main character, but I am missing a slight connection, and I think that's also because you know so little about them yet. But I'm very interested to read more about them in the second volume. The story is about Micah. She is an Arcanic and she lives in a world where humans and Arcanics are at war with one another. And Micah has seen some horrible things, has experienced some horrible things, and at the start of the story she is being sold into slavery. So that's pretty heavy already. And you also find out that Micah has a monster living inside of her, hence the title Monstrous. And she doesn't know what that monster is going to do, why it's living inside of her. And throughout the story you find out more about it, as she does as well. And the artwork is very beautiful. I really love the brownish tones with which this story is told. It's very atmospheric. It's very gory at times. There's a lot of violence within this story, but I am very much intrigued and I definitely want to know more. And then the last book I finished in November was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and that reminds me that Troy was not the 9th book of my list of 10 books I want to read in 2021 that I finished. It was the 8th book, this was the 9th book. I completely forgot about this, but I read The Secret History finally, and I have very mixed feelings about it. I was considering doing a full video on this, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I might still write a blog post about it, but I'm not sure yet. The Secret History is super popular. It was written in the 90s and it is still a book that's sold a lot, a book that's read a lot, especially here on BookTube and on Bookstagram. It's a lot of people's favorite book, and at the start of the story I definitely saw how it could become one of my favorites as well. But that's not what happened. The short version of my thoughts on this is that I loved the first part of the story. This book is divided into a book 1 and a book 2. I adored book 1, it was full 5 stars, no doubt about it. And book 2 kind of fell a little flat for me, and I've heard that from more people after finishing this. First of all, I want to say that the writing in this is absolutely magnificent. I loved it. It was a bit dense, but not too dense. It felt like it fitted the story very well. I loved the vocabulary that was used. It flowed beautifully. It was a bit cinematographic even. I really vividly imagined what was happening, and I don't always have that when reading books. So the writing was beautiful. It immediately reeled me in at the start of the book, as did the prologue, which is very intriguing and I think one of the best prologues I've ever read. But because of the way this story is set up, and because of how the first book ends and the second book starts, my attention started slipping a little bit. I think the second part of the book was too long, with not enough happening in it. I don't have that big of a problem with the ending, but I also didn't think it suited the story very well. I'm not going to go into it more than that, because as I was reading I kept wondering, how the hell is this story going to end? I really had no idea, and just for that reason I was interested to keep reading, but my attention definitely slipped in the second part. It felt a bit dull at times, even though the writing was still very good. I really enjoyed the character development, getting to know these characters better, getting to see how they responded to the events of this book. It was definitely a psychological novel in that sense as well, seeing what these characters did, how they reacted. But the second book just didn't feel special anymore. The first book, like I said, was 5-star material. Amazing. I could definitely see why it is a modern classic. The second part of the book just felt average to me, 3 stars with great writing. So yeah, mixed feelings. And I do understand why so many people love this book so much, but I was just a bit disappointed upon finishing the book. I also didn't like the epilogue. I thought it was a bit indulgent. That's my thoughts on The Secret History. They're a bit rambly. I'm still not entirely sure what my thoughts on it are exactly. There we are. So that was my slightly chaotic November wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this video. What was your favorite book that you read in November? Have you read any of the books that I mentioned? What were your thoughts on them? Please let me know in a comment down below. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of me in the future. And have a wonderful day. Bye!